We are recording, and I'm going to welcome everybody to class number 19 of
Mm.
Faith and Calm. And this week's topic is, I originally gave topic to my wife. I said it's going to be the Geulah mindset, having a Geulah mindset outlook, which she said people aren't going to understand. But this is, rather than thinking in Gullah's viewpoint, it's thinking about how things are, and exiled, but having a broad, expansive opponent. So she changed it, and it actually is going to fit fairly well too, which is how to turn fear into fun. So we're gonna try and figure out how to do that this week. And as an approach, I'm going to continue a little bit from last week. And hello, Mally. And we'll try and transition from there into the Geulah, the Geulah mindset, because our generation is a generation of transition. We are leaving behind the norms and the normal society that we had in the past, and going into a new society. So people keep saying, when is things going to return to normal? And the answer is probably never. And that really creates a lot of anxiety for people. But it's not going to be like this either. It's a delicate time, and in a time of transition, it's very hard. As you know, with children, whenever you transition from one location to another, that's usually when they start fighting and screaming and yelling and so forth. So, it's moving from one place to another. So this is an age of transition. So I'm going to first address it in the national context, which was what we were talking about last week, about the Jewish people and how they had to deal with a big transition when things are never going to be the same again. Because for 1,000 years, the Jews had a place where they could go, where they could connect with reality, which was the temple. You go there, you saw godliness, you experienced godliness, and you knew what the reality of the world was about. And that went on for 1,000 years. And you packed yourself up, and everybody was there. And this was the place. This was the place where everything in your life happened. This is where you had your, after you gave birth, you brought an offering there. After you got, if you did an Avera, you brought it there. You became, any of your transition periods in life, this was where it happened. It happened in the temple. The Kohen Gadol was there, and you sensed and you felt and you saw miracles, 10 constant miracles constantly happening there. And it was just amazing. It was an amazing place. And now it was all destroyed. It was this smoldering bunch of rocks. Is what we see today. Doesn't look like anything like it did when the temple was there. And the Jews had to, at this point, become much deeper and broader and more magnificent view of what their relationship of godliness was. And it could have gone either way. I mean, it was, by all rights, Judaism should have never continued after that. You're exiled. Most of the country is killed. The rest are in slaves, in bondage, in chains, taken away. No country ever restored itself. And then 70 years later, the Jews came back. How did they do that? So I'm going to give you one little perspective on this, but bear with me. It's going to sound very strange. There's an obscure Gemara that most Bachrim don't learn. It's in Masechta Bechoros. And it's the first 4 or 5 pages discuss a group of people called the Sabe Bay Atuna, the sages of the house of Athens. The sages of Athens were the great scholars of Athens. And at one point, one of the great rabbis of the Second Temple period, Rabbi Hananiah ben Trajan, was trying to deal with the Romans to get them to ease up on their persecution of the Jews. And the Caesar sent him to them as a duel, an intellectual duel, as a debate. And if he could beat them in arguments, then the Caesar would listen to him. So he traveled to Athens. He went to the Parthenon, which is where these great philosopher sages sat. And the Gemara records their dialogue. And it's a very strange section. It was sort of like it was a duel, but it was a duel of philosophies. But it's very cryptic. It's all riddles. You read it. It's like they ask Rabbi Hananiah, what's the distance between the earth to the moon? And he'll say the distance is from the moon to the earth. And what is he talking about? Or they'll ask him, if a chicken dies while it's still in the egg, where does its soul go? And he says, the same way as it got in. You know, you read these things, you don't understand. What are they talking about? So one of the debates, one of the discussions that happened was that at one point they took out 2 eggs. And they showed him the 2 eggs, and they told him, one of these eggs came from a black chicken and one came from a white chicken. Can you tell me which one it is? And his answer back to them was, he took out 2 pieces of cheese, both white pieces of cheese. And he said, one of these came from a black goat and one came from a white goat. Can you tell me which one it is? And they say, wow, you win. And that's all the Gemara tells you. It doesn't tell you anything more than that. And you're supposed to figure this out. And the great rabbis have discussed and discussed and discussed these riddles, because encoded in these riddles are actually many of the secrets of life. And what they were debating us is the Greek philosophy versus the Jewish philosophy. And the Maharal explains, and I'm going to elaborate a little bit on it, what this last discussion was about, because it's very relevant to what we're talking about here. When they took out the 2 eggs, did anybody here know how long it takes for a chicken to hatch? No, you don't grow them on farms. 21 days. From the time it's fertilized till the time it comes out, it's 21 days. Or not fertilized, whatever it is. It takes 21 days for the egg to come out. So they were saying to him, listen, you Jews, you have 22 21-day, 3-week periods. One of them is filled with joy. It's the period between Rosh Hashanah and Hoshana Rabbah. This is a time where the Jews are being forgiven and all their sins are being forgiven, and Shemini Atzeres and Simchas Torah is a separate holiday. So those 3 weeks, from Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur to Hoshana Rabbah, those 3 weeks are filled with joy. And he says, you have another 3 weeks, and they're filled with sadness. And those are the 3 weeks that we just finished, the time from Shvaz Rei B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, until Tisha B'Av. And those are the saddest days of the years, and there are many calamities that happen to the Jews over the years in these periods. And basically what they were telling him was, one of the big philosophy principles in Greek is that there is no advantage to whether the world is a good world or a bad world. It's a random place, and things just happen. And there's no, even you Jews agree with us, there is no difference between the happy times and the bad times in your life. 3 weeks and 3 weeks. It's a chaotic place. Things happen and disasters happen, and there is no, it's just, you just have to deal with it as best you can. There's nobody home, and this is how it is. It's, this is the world. And their argument is pretty strong, because if you look at the world, sometimes you wonder, where's the world going to? Is it going positive or is it going bad? And this is a serious question. This is a really serious question for a lot of us, is what's happening in the world. And what was his answer to them? His answer was an interesting one. So he took out the 2 pieces of cheese. What is he telling them? So he's telling them the following, but I'll answer the answer with a little story, and I think it gives a little insight into it. So there's a story about, I'm going deep diving into a story in the story, but excuse me and hope you're following where I'm going here. When Alexander the Great came to the land of Israel during the early time of the Second Temple, he challenged a Jewish artist, and he said, you're a great artist and painter. I need you to make a painting of me, but I need it to have 2 things in it. I need it to be both accurate and flattering, and paint it of me. There was only one problem. Alexander the Great had a big birthmark over his eyes. And by Greek society, the beauty and the perfection of the human body was very much adored. And so if he showed him it as being accurate, showing the birthmark, he would, you could come up a head shorter, because, that's not considered beauty. But if he does show it just as beautiful, then, what's with the birthmark? You're not painting me. You're taking it away. So you have this dilemma: accuracy versus beauty, nice versus truth. What do you do? And this is the dilemma that he had. So what did he do? He was a smart Jewish guy. He learned in yeshiva. And he decided, he said, you know what? I'm going to paint Alexander in deep thought. So what did he do? Rodin, the thinker? Yeah. He did it like this. That's what he did. He painted Alexander in deep thought with his hand on his forehead thinking. And he was flattered because he was a philosopher, king, and this was a flattering picture of him, you know? And basically what the Jew did is he took the problem, which was the blemish and the accuracy, and he made it part of the solution. You know, he saw that that was actually part of the solution. And this is what Rabbi Nechaniah ben Terajan was telling him. That's why he took out the 2 pieces of cheese. He said, by us Jews, we don't view the world, you know, you can either look at the world 2 ways. You can either look at it, as some people try and do, they try and say, you know, it's an accurate world and it has to be truthful. And like the great French and German existentialists just say, you know, you just have to deal with the emptiness and the truth and the disaster of what the world is. There's really nobody listening, nobody cares, and it's just basically a horrible, chaotic place. Or you can try and denigrate people's suffering, and you're going to try and make everything beautiful. Oh, it's really beautiful. You know, you're suffering. Things are good. You know, and you denigrate their emotions and their feelings and so forth, and you say it'll all be better in the world to come or something like that. And the Jews basically have denied both. They said we don't have to do either. We don't have to play games, and we don't have to live in a fantasy world. But on the other hand, the accuracy is true too. So how do you do it? You take the problem and you make it part of the solution. You say, you know what? These 2 pieces of cheeses are actually both, we don't see them as one coming from darkness and one from light. We see them both coming from, both 2 kinds of light. There is the light that comes out of the light, and there's the light that comes from darkness, and both of them are kinds of light. Both of them are ways that actually are ways of connecting with Hashem. Both of them are ways of transforming. One of ways has to happen that you have to, as I said last week, you know, in order to rebuild the building, you have to have first the renewal. You have to destroy the building. But destroyal of the building is not destruction in itself. It actually is another way of getting to a higher place. Whereas I heard one rabbi talk about it today. He said, you know, when you open up a seltzer bottle, you know, I saw somebody, it spritz all over him. And he said, you know, the way to open a seltzer bottle is you first take 2 twists to one side, opening it up, and then 1 back, and then 2 forward, and then 1 back. He says, that's life. You got to go every time you have a setback, every time there's a disaster, every time the temple is destroyed, every time there's a destruction, you have to say, I don't know what this is. And I am clueless. We don't know why this is happening to us, but our response is always the same. We're going to take 2 steps forward. We're going to view this as an opportunity for renewal. We're going to use the destruction of the temple as a way of celebrating. We're going to build a better temple the next time around. So the first one was destroyed, we're going to build a better one. We're going to take whatever is negative in our lives, and whenever something hits us, a curveball or something like ball or something like that, we're going to take this and we're going to use it for improvement. And I'm not trying to wash over this and just say everything is nice, you know. It doesn't solve the problem of suffering. It doesn't solve the problem of pain. But, you know, and ultimately, though, you see the Jews survived, and they not only survived, they thrived, because we never tried to just paint the world in some magical, rosy kind of picture or deny people's real feelings. We always saw this and when everything goes bad, it's an opportunity to look into ourselves, to make a deeper connection, and to go forward. And that is, I think, the lesson for the Jewish people. We don't try and whack paper over things. We try and take it and use it and go forward with it. Now that's on the national scene. Now I want to take this and take it 1 step further and bring it down on the personal level, and directly more deal with the current, with our lives ourselves. So there's a fascinating little Torah that I just heard yesterday, and I listened to it again today just to make sure I got it right. From Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, but it really is something he heard from the Rebbe. So he's just passing it through, and I'm just passing it on to you. So he remembers it was Erev Yom Kippur, right before Kol Nidre, and he was together with a bunch of Bachurim up the stairs in 770, and the Rebbe came out and he gave a very, very strange little talk. He talked about a matter in Jewish law. There is this thing called ritual impurity, tuma and tara. And usually, something dead touches a pot, a pan, a bed, a clothing, or something like that, that article becomes Tameh. And if you touch it, you become Tameh too, and you can't bring a sacrifice and so forth. This was in the time of the temple, and you're not allowed, you have to go through a purification process, going to the mikvah, things of that sort. There's a law that has to do with earthenware vessels, things made out of clay that are put in the fire and done. So they're a little different. It's not by touching, but rather if like a dead animal or a bug goes down into the cup, into a vessel, then it doesn't have to touch, but as soon as it goes inside, it makes that vessel impure into the airspace. If it's completely flat plate and has no receptacle to it at all, then there's no way it'll become Tameh. Can't become. So that's interesting. So the Rambam asks a question. He says, you know, a pipe also has an airspace inside, but it's open on the other side. Can it become Tameh or not? And the answer is no, because the whole point of function of a thing is not to hold something, it's to go through. So Rabbi I said, I was wondering, where's the Rebbe going with this? He's telling us on just a law, but what's the point of it? What is it supposed to teach? And Rebbe says, no, this is an important thing about life and about ourselves and about being a human being. A human being, many times in the Gemara, is compared to clay, earthenware, vessel. Most of his body is made out of, the earth substance. And when you look at yourself, you have to realize that you are a pipe to go through. Stuff comes in and goes out. On the side, everything on the physical level is a mirror of how things go on in the spiritual level. So in spiritual levels, sometimes people say things that are very hurtful to us. Sometimes it's some things that's very close to us. And we get all worked up about it. And it blocks up inside of ourselves. And it starts to affect the rest of our lives. That's not good. That's just like with the human body. You got to let things pass through. You got to let things pass through whenever something terrible happens to you, an incident happens to you, somebody insults you, somebody gets you angry or something of that sort. If we start letting ourselves get all worked up and it starts affecting the rest of our lives and we can't get it out of our system, that's a blockage. That's just as bad as a blockage to the heart or the artery or something of that sort. And constipation ain't good. So, you get all worked up. So you know what you have to do every day? You have to sit down, maybe twice, maybe 3 times a day and saying, am I flushing out all these things that happened to me? This doesn't mean that you try and pretend like it didn't happen. It happened. And you feel it, and just like the pipe, when something bad goes through the pipe, it bothers it for a while, but you got to let it go pass through. And the second part is you have to realize that every human being is a conduit for a higher force, meaning godliness. Our lives is not something separate than us. It's not like I am me and I have to take care of my life. I am my life, and my life is me, as the Tanya says, and it also says that God is my life. So the true sense of who I am and my true identity is godliness. And does God get upset? And does God get depressed? And does God give up and throw in the cloth and just say it's hopeless and I'm never getting married and I never can get my act together and I never can really relate to this kid and I never can relate to my brother or my sister or something of that sort? He's infinite. He never throws in the towel. He never gives up. And you know what? That's also a channel. Whenever we become a clear channel for that, we realize that we have infinite powers because that's who we are. We may not see it ourselves, how we get through the situation, but you know what? That's really our power. And that explains a very interesting thing in this week's Parsha. Moshe is talking to the Jewish people. He's going to pass away very soon. This is all of Parshat Devorim. This is his final speech to the Jewish people. And he tells the Jewish people the following line, and I thought it was interesting. He uses the word Shema Yisrael. The famous Shema Yisrael. Those 2 words are only used 4 times in all of the Chumash. Last week he said Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And this week he says Shema Yisrael, Atam over Hayom et Hayarden Levo Laresh Goyim Gedolim Vatsumi Mecha Arim Gedolim Uvetsorot Bashamayim. He's saying, listen, O Israel, you're going to pass the Jordan today, and you're going to have to deal with nations that are bigger than you, greater than you, or more populous than you, with cities and walls that are sky high. And there are people who are so tall, like Amalekites, and you know about the Amalekites, you heard about them, who can stand up to the children of Amalek. And you should know this day that God is going to be crossing in front of you. Now, The reason why this is very odd is because he's basically paraphrasing exactly the same lines that the Jewish spies used 40 years earlier. They came back and they completely demoralize the Jewish people by telling them that the land is full of giants, just like Moses is doing, and telling them that the cities are fortified to the heavens, just like Moses is doing, and they're bigger and more powerful than you. Now, this seems like a great way to demoralize somebody who's in the grips of fear, because all you're doing is bringing back their old fears. And you're just asking them to go back into the same location and the same situation. As a therapist, it's not a good idea to go tell them, to try and reawaken the same thing, the same triggers that caused the people to panic in the first place. So what is Moses trying to do? And the answer is we just were given the two tools to answer that brilliantly, and so forth. The first one is God is going in front of you. It's not about you. Yes, it's true. There's lots of reasons to fear. And you cannot tell a person who has fear, sometimes if you're a therapist, you can't just tell them, you're delusional. It's not really a lie and it's really not that bad. And you just really have to, your worldview is off. Try talking to somebody who's scared of flying in airplanes. It's real to him. Emotionally, it's real to them. They can't do it. Or it's emotionally, it's real that, I can't talk to my brother, my sister, I can't talk, I never could deal with my child or something like that. I could never really do it. That's real. That is reality. Fear is real. And you don't try and tell people who are in the grips of fear about things that are not real. You know what? You tell them about the truth. But you say, you know what? It's true. However, it's not all about you and what you think about the situation is. God is with you. He wants you to succeed. You're doing the right thing. And you can go through this medical procedure, and you can go through this terrible situation, and you can deal with the things that you never dealt before, and you can overcome because God believes in you, and He's with you, and He's giving you your life, and He's together with you. He's going first before you. So Moses is really doing the thing that all great Jewish leaders and all other great leaders did in history. If you read the words of Winston Churchill in 1940, Neville Chamberlain was removed as the leader of the British people. The British had just suffered a disastrous defeat in France. They escaped with the few 100,000 British soldiers over the Channel, and Britain was left all alone. There was nobody left in Europe. All the other countries, France, Luxembourg, Netherlands, all their allies were gone. The Russians were on the side had a peace treaty with the Germans, and America didn't want to get into the war. And Churchill got onto the radio and he told them the following. He said, we have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many long months of struggle and suffering. You ask, what is our policy? I can say it is to wage war by sea, land, or air with all our might and with all our strength that God has given to us. To wage war against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed by the dark, lamentable category of human crime. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. He got the lines from Moshe. Because, when people are faced with a difficult situation, you don't try and paint a rosy picture on them, just as we said earlier. You don't try and denegate people's fears and worries. You don't try and say that it's not real. It is real. It's real to them. And if it's real to them, you know what? You can tell them it is real. And you know what? You empower the person when you tell them about that. You give them strength. Why? Because you give them space to be able to not spend their time trying to deny and think that maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm failing or something else. No, it's scary. Okay, it's scary. There are a lot of scary things in life. Life has scary things in it. Don't tell you that life is not scary. It has a lot of terrible things that happen in it. But you know what? It's not all about you. And the powers that you're given are not all about you either. And so it's not all about what you have an ability. And when you live through it and when you survive through it, you become a stronger person and you become a bigger person and you find a deeper level of inside of yourself. So this is what he's saying is, listen, you gotta, the fear is okay. It happens and you can't deny that it's happening. But you can have fun with it. How? So he gives a cute little analogy. This is Rabbi YY again. He says 2 minutes, 2-minute warning.
No, I'll be back in 2 minutes.
No, it's okay. So he says that when he was a kid once, the parents were taking them out to a circus. And all the, they said, we're going to the circus, and the air conditioning didn't work, and it was a long trip, and all the kids started fetching in the car right away. And the parents were trying to tell them, oh, it's going to be great, it's going to be great, it's going to be great. And you know what? Yeah, it was eventually, but but they fetched the entire way. He said, what would have been much better is if you told them, kids, we're going on a long trip. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And there's going to be a lot of time spent. And you know what, though? We're going to get to the end. We're going to be in a circus, and it's going to see some interesting things. And they all go, yeah, we want to do that. We don't want to stay home. We want to go. We want to go. And you know what? That sort of enables them to have the strength and the fortitude to be able to take the long trip. So when you tell people, there's two ways that you can try and tell people. You can try and tell people their fears are not really fears. The disasters are not really disasters. And you can try and say, like you said with the cheese, to try and paint the world as a rosy place and all good. Judaism didn't do that. It said, it doesn't try and denigrate and doesn't say everything is happening in the world to come and doesn't try and do marketing. It says the world is a real world and things really happen here. But you know what? You have an ability to accomplish amazing things because you are empowered by an infinite power. And in that infinite power, you can change things beyond what you can possibly know inside of yourself. So the bottom line is, I think I heard it from Audrey Hepburn. I was looking up quotes about life, and she said, so I decided very early on just to accept life unconditionally. I have learned how to live, how to be in the world and of the world, and not just stand by and watch. So I think those are good lines because, you can try and run away from life and you can try and protect yourself. And, we all don't want to deal with a lot of different kinds of things. But, ultimately it means that we have less of a life. The more we isolate ourselves and the more we don't challenge ourselves, the less we have of that. So, life has these things. Sometimes it's a Ferris wheel and sometimes it's a roller coaster, but it goes up. Whatever goes down goes back up again. And this is what the Jews did with Tisha B'Av. They said, it's a destruction, but this is the opportunity for rebuilding the temple. Tisha B'Av is eventually going to be a holiday because the third temple is going to be built. Mashiach was born on Tisha B'Av. That's the story. The story actually goes like that. This was once a Jewish farmer. He was plowing in the Geulah with a cow, and his cow gave a big moo, and the Arab who was sensitive to spiritual things says, you should stop working. The temple was destroyed. And a few minutes later, the cow gave another moo, and the Arab said, your Messiah has been born, and you're going to, and that's going to be it. And that's what it is. It's ultimately the seeds with any destruction. We believe there's a good God. He cares about us. And that what he's really doing, although we can't fit it into our head, is really giving us an opportunity by destroying the old places, allowing us to renovate and build a deeper and more profound connection with him. And that's true in all of our lives. And I think this is a really powerful lesson going now as we are going from the darkest days of the years to the happiest days of the years. In 2 days, it's going to be Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av. And the statement about the 15th of Av was there is no day as sad on the Jewish calendar as the 9th of Av, and there's no day as happy as the 15th of Av, the Tu B'Av. Why is that? Because the moon is full. Because after the moon is darkened on Tisha B'Av, the darkest, the light that comes out after the darkness is always a more powerful light. And that is how Jews have lived. And that is the basic dynamic of the universe that we believe in, is that, whenever we do see the pain, and the Jews have seen more pain probably than most other people, I think all other people, we've been around longer and we've gone through more disasters and more destructions, but we've also know how to live and we know how to rejoice. And this is the dance of life. And I give my blessings to all of you that you should all be dancing on Tu B'Av. And of course, it's a day for weddings. It was the traditional day for when all the Jewish girls would go out into the field and would, the opposite, they would encourage the Jewish boys to get married. And this is Tu B'Av. And so we should all join into Tu B'Av with a real happiness. We've been through the worst of it now. And now we can all look forward to the transformation. And the transformation will continue with my wife, and she will continue to explain how to deal with one's fears.
Thank you, Yasher Koach.
Thank you, Yasher Koach. I liked the title, the Geulah Mindset. I thought that captured it very well. I was excited about that.
Wait, he told you about the title, The Geulah Mindset?
Yeah, he said that you liked better. You thought people would access better the idea of, turn your fear into great things. But
No, but I thought a lot of people wouldn't understand what. I have to unplug that thing. Wouldn't understand what the word Geulah meant in the title. You have to already be partly savvy in order to understand what the word Geulah is. So first of all, I want to say hi, Claudine. Hi, Emily. Hi, Karen. Wait, excuse me. Shimona. I can't remember. Okay.
Shimona Bracha.
Shimona Bracha. Very nice. Hi, Molly. And good to see you all. Oh, let's move this closer. How come I'm so short? Oh, because my husband put the chair down. I don't know. I'm still short. I don't know why it's not working. Maybe I shrank since last week. So, okay. So anyway, no, it's not going to work. We'll just do it this way. And good. So the time now is 7:32. And Emily, do you want me to set a timer? Or are you going to have to go early?
I have to go a little early, honey.
Okay, good. So I'm going to set a timer for about, come. Okay, good. So, good. So I like to begin all the time by saying what the main thrust is in my section of the talks, and my main section is to remind us, because it's easy to forget, that we're in an extraordinary time, and that we ourselves are extremely important for that time, and our souls were handpicked to be at this most exciting junction of human history, and it's not just exciting, it's challenging. And we were given tools to deal with the challenge. The tools are the Torah, which predicted everything that's happened so far, and mitzvos, which are like holy time bombs that just introduce holiness into the world. And we were given a leader. We were given a leader in every generation. We're never without a leader. And the Rebbe gave us tremendous instruction about what to do right now. And also, the last point that I like to make every week is that what we're doing tonight is a major accomplishment. Learning about Mashiach, learning about what's happening right now is one of the most powerful things that we can possibly do to advance goodness in the world and to advance the process of Mashiach. What we do in the privacy of our homes is as powerful as a holy atom bomb. It is how this war is won. So anyway, I would like to start out by picking up with something that we said last week, and I was saying that one thing about that the Rebbe is like a shepherd, and in fact, all the Jewish people, all the leaders of the Jewish people were called shepherds. And why shepherd? It's a very strange thing. They could have been called, I don't know, all sorts of different names, but why shepherd? Moshe was actually a shepherd, and Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, they were all shepherds. But why is the leader of the nation called a shepherd? And the reason, there's one thing, there's a couple things about a shepherd. A shepherd, what does a shepherd do? A shepherd guides sheep to greener pastures, to whatever, he sees where they should go, and he guides them there. But there's something else that's extremely important about a shepherd, and that is that a shepherd can't just guide an entire flock in the right destination. That's a sort of shepherd. But a true shepherd is somebody who is someone who understands each of the beings in his care. He understands the ins and outs of each one of them, and he has a plan for each one of them. He has a plan to lead each one of them to their highest and best self, and to becoming who they really were meant to be all along. So, brief story that David HaMelech, in another class, I think we mentioned him. I'm not going to talk about it here, but he had one of the most difficult lives you can possibly imagine. And when he was young, he wasn't at home. It was easier for him to spend his time outside. He took care of the family's sheep. And when he was taking care of the family's sheep, he noticed something, that when he would bring the sheep to a new pasture, that the strong animals that were in the prime of their lives, they would eat everything in sight, and it would be very hard for the little sheep and the older sheep to get the food that they needed, because they couldn't eat every kind of grass. They could only eat, delicate, tender grass. So, whenever he would lead them to a new pasture, he would build a temporary pen, and he would put all of them in. And I believe the first one that he would let out at first, I believe the first ones were the babies. He would let out the babies first, because the babies could only eat the tiniest, newest, softest grass. And then after the babies had their fill, he would let out the older sheep. And the older sheep, they ate the regular grass. They were okay with that. Their digestion could manage regular grass. And then when the older ones had their fill, then he would let out all those in their prime of life. And they could eat stubble, they could eat dry stuff, they could eat whatever was left, and everybody was happy. And the Medrash says that Hashem saw this, and Hashem said, this is one that's going to lead my people. Somebody who understands the needs of every single one under his care. That's what I want. And so anyway, so in our analogy, we're talking about the Rebbe, and we know that the Rebbe told us, the Rebbe made many astounding predictions. All the public predictions that I ever heard from the Rebbe, some of them were mind-boggling, but universally they all came true, everything he said. And the Rebbe told us that we are in the beginning of the Geulah, we are in the beginning of the process of redemption. We've already entered the beginning. And the Rebbe hinted many, many, many times that he is Mashiach. And he said casually in one of his talks, and by the way, burial has no effect on the leader of the generation. He said many, many astounding things that he just dropped in his talks. So if if the Rebbe is a shepherd, and he's a shepherd that has in mind the entire Jewish people, everything that he said is not only to lead the entire Jewish people to where we have to go, which is to the Geulah, to the redemption, but it's also perfect instructions, not only for the group, but for each individual. Each of the things the Rebbe said to do is not only a nice thing to help the Jewish people, it's what I personally need to get where I need to go. So what are some of the things that the Rebbe said? The Rebbe said that we should learn about Mashiach. It's not only good for the whole Jewish people, it's good for me personally. That we should live Geulah, we should live the redemption. Don't live in an exile kind of way. And what does it mean and we learned last week, or a couple weeks ago, one of the ways to live redemption is to be something called a panimi. A panimi, literally translated as an inward person. Not that we're totally out there, but it means to do something through and through. Like if you're talking, if you're writing, if you're listening to somebody, you're there and you are nowhere else. That is it. There's no past, there's no future. You're concentrated completely on what you're doing. And it's said that that's what it's going to be like in the complete Geulah, that we can, when we have the whole thing with the temple and all that stuff, we are going to be living each moment fully. And the static that exists throughout the entire time of exile, there's static. Our heads are filled with static. This is happening. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about that. The static will be gone. Can you imagine how delicious that's going to be? So anyway, the Rebbe says, do it now. Live without the static as much as you can. And what else did the Rebbe say? He said that not only should we learn about Mashiach, but we should learn something called Devar Malchus. Devar Malchus is those are the talks that the Rebbe gave in the last 11 months when he was talking before his stroke. And they are time capsules that give us instructions for all the time now. It's they're incredibly instructive. And he said that's the fastest route to speed the Geulah. So I'm going to tell you a story now about my life and how the Rebbe, as a shepherd, guided me to something that I needed, something that I didn't know I needed. And how Hashem is, you have to say Hashem has a big part in this. Hashem runs the world. And so my story begins in the summer of 2007. And I had already been married for more than a decade. And through the first decade of our marriage, we had, it was a wonderful decade, but I had a lot of difficulties. My parents were incredibly ill the whole time, and we experienced infertility, and infertility wasn't easy. And then in the summer of 2007, we'd already given up on all that kind of stuff. That was already in the past. And I got a phone call at the end of the summer, end of spring, beginning of summer. And the person said, Shlomo Yehudis, what would you think about adopting a Jewish baby? And I thought, now, a baby, and it was a very, very strange suggestion, but it was so incredibly unusual because that such a thing never happens, at least not that I know of. It never happens. When I went through my years of infertility, I remember calling the state of Massachusetts, I forgot what it's called, but their adoption, network. And I explained very patiently to the social worker, her name was Rosemary something, and I said, if you should ever hear about a Jewish child that's put up for adoption, please have us in mind. I want to let you know about who we are, where we are. I can send you stuff about us. And she talked to somebody like you talk to, somebody who you felt really, I don't know. She tried to explain in very simple terms, and she said, I want to tell you, my dear, that I've been a social worker for the state of Massachusetts for 25 years in adoption. And she said, and I want to tell you that not once in those 25 years has a Jewish baby ever come up for adoption in Massachusetts. It simply doesn't happen. Jews, she said, what happens is the community absorbs the child before it ever goes to the level of being given up to the state. It just doesn't get this far because Jews take care of situations like this themselves within their community. And so to get a call that there's actually a Jewish baby for adoption. So I went to, we thought about it, and then we eventually got excited about it. And I went to my mashpia at the time. Maybe some of you know her. I don't know, Mrs. Shiner. She was my mashpia at the time. She was my spiritual mentor, and I told her the situation, and her first reaction was, Shlomo Yehudis, I don't know, probably they're going to lead you down a long road and then dump you. And I said, oh, Mrs. Shiner, it's such an opportunity. And I sort of like bent her. You're not supposed to do that to a mashpia. And she said, okay, go ahead. And anyway, it was such a rollicking summer. The people that we got involved with, this adoption agency, the lawyer, the person in charge of the adoption agency, it was like dealing with a bunch of crooks. It was like dealing with a marketplace of crooks. And every time we would ask for something, we gave them the down payment. The mother was in California, and the state of California, obviously you can't buy a baby, but you can support the mother in whatever style she wants to be supported during the 9 months of pregnancy. So and we had to give $15,000 down to the adoption agency for the privilege of being considered. And so we did, and then we gave the first payment. And every time we tried to ask for a tiny thing, like, for example, we want the records of, her health records. We want to see what the obstetrician says about how healthy this baby is and all that stuff. They say, oh, sure. We'd pay money, and then they would say, we're not showing you anything. The birth mother doesn't let us show you anything. And every time they would make a promise, and then they would renege, and they'd make a promise, renege, make a promise, renege. In the middle of the summer, we flew out to California to meet the birth mother. And while we were there, it was more shenanigans. And I said, Yeheskel Shimon, let's just drop it. We lost a lot of money already. Let's get out while we still have our shirts on our back. Let's go. And Yeheskel Shimon, who is so much less of a gambler than I am, he said, Shlomo Yehudis, we've gone this far. Let's go the whole way. So we went the whole way. And the only person we were impressed with was the birth mother. She gave it such a good impression. And so that's what gave us heart. And I was dealing with a rabbi, a very smart rabbi in Crown Heights. His name is Yossi Paltiel. He was my advisor during this time. And he said to me, and I was telling him what crooks the adoption agency person was and the lawyer. I said, but at least the birth mother's normal. He said, Shlomo Yehudis, I hate to tell you. I never met her. I never spoke to her, but I'm telling you, she's the craziest of the three of them. I said, no, she makes a wonderful impression. He said, mark my words, you're going to see she's the craziest of the three of them. He said, Jewish women do not sell their babies. She had done this at least 2 times in the past. This was her 3rd baby that she was, giving birth to and then selling for a certain amount. I mean, however much money she'd make during the process of pregnancy. And he said, it doesn't happen. There's something wrong with this woman. And I said, no, you haven't talked to her. She's really very impressive. And anyway, to make a long story short, 4 days before she gave birth, she went crazy. She said all sorts of horrible things about us, like crazy things, absolutely crazy things, so that she would have an excuse to move on to the next family. And then that family would have to give their $15,000 down payment. And then she went on to, she said, no, I don't want them. And then a 3rd family had to pay their $15,000 down payment. She burned through like 4 families before she gave birth. And the agency and she made quite a killing. And I was on the, it was very, very, very painful. I was on the killing end, yeah. And I was so crushed. I couldn't believe that this had happened. And, Rabbi Paultiel was absolutely right. She was the craziest of all of them, or the same kind of gangster as all of them. And so there I was a few days before Rosh Hashanah. Can you imagine? And my foundations were getting a little rocky. I was ready for them for a very, very long time. And I had a good foundation there. I really did. But the foundation was a little rocky at that point. Then between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the second tragedy, we had a child that we helped care for, and he had a devastating tragedy. His father was in a devastating car accident. I won't even give you the details. It was just horrendous. And Haskell Shimon flew with him out to California to deal with that crisis. And then we had to deal with him. And I didn't tell you the whole time. My mother was not alive at this point already. And the only person I had told about the whole adoption thing, the only person I confided in a lot was my father. My father had had a massive stroke 1.5 years before. And everybody said, he doesn't understand. But I didn't care. I spoke to my father every day. And I thought, I think he does understand. And so I told him all about the adoption and I kept him apprised. And then when it collapsed in our face, I called, I was talking to my father and I said, Daddy, the adoption fell through. They dropped us. And I heard, oh. My father, I knew that. I knew he understood everything. And so after the adoption collapsed, and then our special child friend, he was going through an incredible tragedy a couple weeks later. And then just a few weeks after that, my father died. My father, that was it for him. And it was like, whoa, Hashem, what are you doing? Massive, massive shakeup, a massive shakeup of me personally. And so, okay. So as we said in the title, the second title, the title of Fears and Opportunity for Greatness, I didn't understand what Hashem was doing to me. I absolutely didn't. And I, I did whatever I could to help myself. I made a list of 10 things that could piece Shalom. I mean, I wasn't a total wreck, but I wasn't myself. And I made a list of 10 things that could piece Shalom Yehudis back together again. And on the top of this list, I had a very, very strange thing that I hadn't thought of for years. On the top of this list, I had learn with Mrs., I'm not going to say her name because I didn't get her permission to tell the story, but I'll call her Holy. Learn with Mrs. Holy. And so who was Mrs. Holy? She was a Rebbitzin in our community. And years before this, many years before this, I had a friend, we'll call her Bina. And Bina had one kid and she desperately wanted another. Her one kid was already 6, 7 years old, and she desperately wanted another one and nothing was working. And she said to Mrs. Holy, come learn with me. Maybe it'll be a good luck thing for me. And she learned with Mrs. Holy one time and she got pregnant. And so I used to tease Mrs. Holy, you have to learn with me too. But somehow it never worked out. it was maybe 6 years since I had seen Mrs. Holy. I didn't think about her. She was out of my consciousness. And all of a sudden, when I was in this very low place, I thought, maybe learning with Mrs. Holy would help you. But I didn't act on it. I acted on, the rest of the list, 2 till 10. And Baruch Hashem, I was piecing myself back together. But I wasn't quite all the way. And so I think it was the end of April. By the end of April, I decided, I'm going to do number 1. It was a Friday in the end of April. And I picked up the telephone to call Mrs. Holy. She wasn't home. I left a message and I said, it's Shalamis Yehudis. Good friend. Do you remember me? And I said, many years ago, we were talking about learning together. And I was just wondering, would you like to learn together? And I left my phone number and I hung up. On Saturday night, I got a phone call from Mrs. Holy. And she said, Shalamis Yehudis, I want to tell you something. She said, on Friday, early Friday, I went to spend Shabbos at my son's house. He lives south of Boston with my son's family. She said, and I didn't get, I left before you left your message. I didn't see your message. I didn't hear it. And she said, but all Shabbos day, when I was in my son's house, I had this thought running through my mind. And I said, Shalamis Yehudis Goodfriend. I was supposed to learn with her. Whatever happened to that? And then she would do something, and then all of a sudden the thought would come back to her. Shalamis Yehudis Goodfriend. I was supposed to learn with her. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to that? She said that to herself a few times. And then on Saturday night, she came home, and there's my message. Hi, it's Shalamis Yehudis Goodfriend. And she said, so anyway, we were both stunned by the open divine providence, and we learned together. And what did she learn with me? She learned Devar Malchus. And it was the very first time I ever learned it. And then and a few weeks later, I went to a women's convention in Florida. Our husbands were allowed. We dragged our husbands with us if we had husbands, and it was such a blast. It was a bunch of women who learned Devar Malchus every day. They have this little group. And who was there? Amy will appreciate this. I had to go. Who was running this convention? It was Beth Friedman, who I hadn't seen in years. Beth Friedman and another friend of mine, another person I'd become close to. Her name is Basha Botnick. And I thought, if Basha Botnick and Beth Friedman are both running this, I have to go. I had a blast and a half. It was so much fun. Haskell Shimon had a great time too. And I came back from that convention completely punched out, completely myself again. And then over the years, I learned with Mrs. Gurkoff. We tried to learn every week. We weren't perfect, but we tried to learn a little bit every week. And I gained the skills to be able to learn on my own. And what Devar Malchus did for me is something that, I had a foundation in 2007. I had a nice foundation in 2007, but it's nothing compared to what I have now. It's nothing compared to the foundation that Devar Malchus has given me. It's like when I first became a Lubavitcher, I started learning something called Tanya. And I felt that, whoa, Tanya, it's like the skies open up and you learn the secrets of the universe. It is the most amazing experience. Devar Malchus is like the map to our time. It's so extraordinary. So sometimes a terrible thing can happen to you, or a seemingly terrible thing, or a terrible thing can happen to you. And Hashem is building you. And he was building me. I couldn't imagine these things are building, but had my foundation not been shaken up, I would never have learned with Mrs. Gurkoff. I would never have started learning Devar Malchus. None of these things would have ever been on my plate. And because my foundation was shaken and I had to search for a deeper foundation, I got something that was, I consider myself so much luckier than the vast majority of people in the frum world, in the religious world, who have a good foundation, but it's not like my foundation. Don't test me, Hashem. I believe me, my foundation even now could be tested, but it's such a thing. So I wanted to tell you that Devar Malchus, they have it in English, they have books in English, but it's going to have a lot of erudite Hasidic concepts that maybe not all of them will be immediately accessible, but this is accessible. These are excerpts. I showed you this another time. These are excerpts from Debar Malchus. It's called From Exile to Redemption. It's available on the internet. A friend of mine was looked for it, and she found it just last week. So they're only like a paragraph long, a long paragraph. You could read one at a time at your leisure. And I have to tell you that book, this book was my doorway to Lubavitch in the beginning, because I was already frum, and oh, here it is. I was frum, but I was not a Lubavitcher. So and when I read that, I thought, whoa, that's interesting stuff. And it pointed me towards the Lubavitch. I saw there's something here in this Lubavitch area. And so anyway, I'm gonna finish with a quick story about what a shepherd does to individuals. That was what a shepherd did for me, and the spiritual shepherd of our time. And now I'm going to tell you another little story about this lady, Mrs. Estulen. So Mrs. Estulen, I know her son. Her son actually is a rabbi in California, and he spoke at my father's shloshim. We gave an event in honor of the 30th day after my father's passing. It's called a shloshim, and we flew him in from California. But anyway, this story happened to his mother. The Estulens come from Russia, and when they came to America, no, they didn't come to America. His mother went to Israel. He came to America. When his mother came to Israel after Russia, she flew to America to have an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, to talk to him. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, when you go back to Israel, I want you to involve yourself in spreading the mitzvah to Jewish women to light candles on Shabbos 18 minutes before the sunset. And she said, Rebbe, it's not for me. She said, first of all, I'm from Russia. I don't speak, my Hebrew is really primitive. And she said, and secondly, I'm afraid of the Israelis. They're so anti-frum people. They're so anti-religious people. I'm afraid of them. Now, I have to tell you that some other time, maybe I'll tell you that it's true that in America, a non-religious person might think of an Orthodox Jew as quaint, something like Amish, or or maybe delusional or something like that, but they don't hate them with the same spirit that exists in Israel. Why? Because in Israel, the religious and the non-religious live right next to each other, and the non-religious feel that the religious step on their toes, because in some cities with a strong religious presence, they don't show movies on Saturday. They don't, various things are closed on Saturday, and it's irritating to secular Jews. So anyway, she said, I'm afraid of him. And the Rebbe said, I'm telling you, this is your calling. He said, go back, do it. And if anybody gives you trouble, tell them you're my emissary. So she goes back. That Friday, that first Friday, it's traditional to do this on Fridays. And that first Friday during the day, she went to the nearest hospital with her supply of candles. And she walks into the first room. And the woman sees this religious woman walking into her room, and she says, what do you want? And in Hebrew. And she said, get out of here. She didn't even ask her. She said, get out. Oh no, Mrs. Estulen said, I came with Shabbos candles. And the lady says, get out of here. I don't want to hear from you. I don't like religious people. Get out of here. And she said some choice words about religious people. And Mrs. Estulen was intimidated. And then Mrs. Estulen remembered what the Rebbe said. And she said, I'm a Hasidah. That means I'm I'm an emissary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He sent me to do this. And the woman stopped talking. She was silent. And the woman said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he sent you? And when she spoke, Mrs. Estulen could detect a Russian accent. And so she answered her in Russian, yes, you know the Lubavitcher Rebbe? And all of a sudden the woman apologized, and she started crying. And she said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I spoke to you so rudely. She said, yes, I don't know him. I know of him. She said, 5 years ago, my brother and I were both in Russia. my brother, yeah, my brother and I were both in Russia at that point. The woman in the hospital bed was saying, and my brother decided to go to America. He was a doctor in Russia. He figured he's going to go to the Golden Medina, the golden land of America, and there'll be money in the streets, and he's going to make a killing. And people told him not to go without support, without a plan, whatever. He went. And he came to America, and doors were continually slammed in his face. He was not successful in anything, and his money ran out. His money was, and after a few months of this, he was incredibly depressed. And after a few more weeks, he decided he's going to end his life, and he walked through Manhattan towards the Brooklyn Bridge. He figured he's going to throw himself off the Brooklyn Bridge. And as he's leaving Manhattan to go to the Brooklyn Bridge, he hears a voice calling out, "Hey, are you Jewish? Did you put tefillin on today?" And the Russian man turns around. He sees a young religious guy with a little table with some tefillin on the table. And the young guy sees the Russian guy's face. And he sees he's Jewish, and he says, hey, if you're Jewish, come here. We'll take your Jewish blood pressure. It's fun. It's easy. It's free. And you'll feel good afterwards. So the guy comes, and he puts tefillin on him. And the Russian man tells him exactly what's happening to him and exactly where he's headed. And the young guy says, you're coming with me? We're going to go to Crown Heights. I promise I'm going to get you an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe tonight. I'm going to do it. And so he goes with him to Crown Heights. He gets him an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the woman in the hospital bed said, I don't know what the Rebbe said to my brother. And I know that he talked to him a lot. He talked to him for half an hour at least. And anyway, she said he came out of there a completely different person. And he wrote me a letter. He wrote me a letter afterwards, and he said, my dear sister, I want you to always remember that if you have a brother who is alive, it's because of the Rebbe. So the woman in the hospital bed looked at Mrs. Eshelin, and she said, look, in Russia, I was an atheist. In Israel, I'm still an atheist. She said, but, maybe give me those candles and maybe tell me what to do with them. And so the Rebbe sent this woman, this poor Mrs. Estelin. She didn't feel it was her calling. She didn't think she would succeed. And he sent her, he said, no, you're going to succeed. Go there. And if you get in trouble, this is what you should say. And, so he gave her the grass she would need. He gave her everything she would need for her to be a success. Anyway, one last point. Maybe we'll save it for next time because it's already late. It's already 8:05. But anybody have any questions or anything to share? You can unmute yourself.
Nothing to share, but thank you so much for telling us such a personal story. And it was, amazing. And so thank you.
Have a wonderful week. I have to scoot.
Pardon? Okay, good. See you. Okay.
I was going to say something similar, is that, it's a courageous story, and I remember you when you were going through that, and it was devastating and heartbreaking. It felt like a miracle had dropped and was taken away. And I feel like, when you're talking about all these 19, 20 weeks, like, how do we live in this time when we're supposed to have hope that something better is happening? Like, that was a very personal story that I think really speaks to the fact that you have to hold on to, that we don't understand why these tragedies befall us, why these disappointments happen, why these things are happening to us, but that somehow there is an end we could not have predicted, and that you're on your way to something, and it was an incredible story, and again, really courageous in the telling. And I hope that the blessing is that you continue to see the wonderful things that come out of a really difficult disappointment, and also that it happens for all of us, that we should all take these really difficult times and come through, and come through
Yes.
to something better and more
Amen.
strength.
Amen. We should see the buried treasure.
We should see the buried treasure. It's buried deep these days, Geulah. It's
Very deep. It's incredible.
pretty down.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
I liked what you said about, or was it Yesko Shemin who said? Maybe it was Yesko Shemin said about yes, it was him. The 3 weeks, that there's three really. That's right, because he was talking about the cheese and eggs. That 3 really, really bad weeks and 3 really, really good weeks, and how interesting how close they are together in time in the calendar. But that this idea that a week after Tisha B'Av, I'd never heard that, was a time for weddings, and it was one of the happiest days.
This Wednesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday,
Tuesday night, Wednesday.
considered the happiest day in the Jewish calendar.
Yeah, I mean, and we're having a huge hurricane or tsunami or something coming this way, tropical something. It probably has a name of some woman, but like
Isaiah.
Isaiah, yeah, right. So it's the name of a guy, but like interesting, name to choose. But I think that there's something nice about the idea that when we get through this time, and as we're getting through this time, that we are awakening to something more beautiful. I feel like that repeated theme every week is what makes us kind of come back and tune in. The Lord knows I get distractions in this house, but I love hearing it. I love the idea of the Geulah mindset, because I think it's what carries us through. Otherwise, my father, right?
And we have to remember that the template was set for us in Egypt. And, in Egypt, we were told the Redeemer came, and things got worse and horribly worse, much, much worse than they were before, much, much worse than they were in the slavery. And yet it didn't mean that it wasn't happening. It was still happening. And so we have to hold on to that. And our redemption is going to be, the redemption from Egypt is going to pale compared to our redemption. So have to hold on to that this is a process, and Hashem has a plan. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you too.